Okay, first we got this IMF guy on the BBC television explaining that in a few weeks' time we might have a big calamity in the world financial markets if we don't come up with a lot of credit. Well, of course, we don't have any credit, but we can create it almost instantly. My country did it yesterday. They created 100 billion euros in new credit and they gave it for this European bailout fund. It's 6,000 euros in my name that's just been created, that I knew nothing about, that I didn't know I had, but that I would like to have actually. And now it's going to be spent by bankers and actually going to be leveraged about 20 times or something like that by bankers, so that my life will become more expensive. Because, just like student loans, everybody, all these other loans, they drive up the price of everything because people, when they have to buy a car, they now have to go into debt. They have to get a loan. To study, they now have to get a loan. You didn't have to, used to, but now you do. That's what the effect is. I don't think it's completely irresponsible. The parliament wasn't involved. Nobody other. I don't think there was really a decision process other than oh, it's going to explode. We're going to have to do something right now. And this IMF guy is explaining the way it works. It's just a bunch of guys with suicide vests holding each other's triggering wire, and I'm having this wire in my hand and I have to sneeze now, so if you don't wipe my nose, then I'm probably gonna blow, and what you're gonna do then? Using CDSs, so let's say the things that are invented in New York are now spread over the whole banking system. Everybody holds CDSs, credit default swaps, on their books, and of course that determines a lot of their book value. That's their game, that's their, let's say, their bonus points system that they use, because it's all virtual. And they say, well, if you trigger that, one bank goes down, then the other goes down. It's a cascade. But of course, that's another way to simply rig the system for destruction, for self-destruction. You have a Boeing 747 with a hostage taker on board, and he says, well, you can try to attack me, but I have a hand grenade underneath one of these chairs, and it will blow if I trip over or if I push this button. That's what they did with the banking system. And what they threaten with, I think, is very, very serious. It's, let's say, I would say it's a treasonous threat, because there's a guy who is, who runs the institution. He says, well, everything will break down. The financial system will break down. What does it mean? Well, it means actual war. Why? Well, because all these contracts won't work anymore. All these interactions won't work anymore. The markets won't work anymore. And the markets decided that they wanted to own everything. All the copper and all the zinc and all the silver and all the gold is all traded in these organized, manipulated markets owned by New York banks. And now suddenly, New York banks falls over, the COMEX is bankrupt, it doesn't exist anymore, there's nobody there, nobody to pay the loans of the people anymore. Who's going to administrate where the gold and silver is? Where is it? Does anybody know? How we're going to ship stuff through Europe? What are all these contracts? What do these rent contracts mean? Who's going to default? So they're basically threatening to eliminate the governing structure of the civilized world if we don't give them more power. They're indeed a bigger government than we ever recognized in our own governments. And they have more deciding decision power than any of our governments have. Because our governments figure out what's nice to have, and these bankers, they figure out what they want to have at all. And if they don't want to have solar panels or thin film solar panels, then they simply make it expensive. And if they don't want to have windmills on homes, then they simply make them expensive. With all their tricks in their books. So such a threat, I think, shouldn't be accepted at all, because before you know it, we'll be fighting over everything again. Or we'll be hoarding it, and nobody will be able to have it. And it's just a calamity of genocidal proportions. And, the emissary of that system might look like an old fart, but, just like Mr. Zulik, who of the World Bank, who kind of philosophize and it advises poor Africans to buy rain index futures, but at the same time admits that it's very hard to guess the productivity of the future if these places dry out. But and most of these, it's like they say die, African farmer, you will have a dry place and you won't, your dry land, and you won't be able to survive. Die. That's his message. That's really, we don't need that. And all this dynamics, I think, is eventually now, right at the moment, all this turbulence is meant to make us desire one world currency, which of course will be holy grail and will be fantastic. Well, any promise coming from a guy, we fall for it time and time again. I guess that's the biggest trick. I had another thought, and that is, of course, Israel is worried about nuclear weapons in Iran and all that stuff, and the Middle East is a powder keg because there might be fighting between these countries. Ever asked yourself what would happen if Middle Eastern countries work together to get the nuclear weapons of Israel? How many days does it take for Iran to get a nuclear weapon? Maybe it doesn't take a day. Maybe it only takes 4 hours, because these distances are not very large. They only have to fly in with a helicopter, knock out some people, get the warhead and fly out. On a good day. And you have a nuclear armed Iran. If I was Israel, and if I wanted to secure myself, I would get rid of the nuclear weapons. Because they have no function whatsoever. It's really a huge risk. Anyway, I think that's it for now. Otherwise I'll go out on all kinds of random... Oh yeah, well, I probably mentioned that I'm now, as a country, as a citizen of Holland, 6,000 euros more in debt because of, let's say, the lack of testicles in my European governments. Angela Merkel might have a, unfuckable behind. What was it? At least she has some financial advisors that have brains. And I wish this Barroso guy and all these other people would recognize that and say, well, listen, Europe demands from the US Congress to make all these CDSs null and void. Europe will, and the US will, from government direction, secure all the trading accounts of people, all the short-term loans of people that are do real things, so no speculation, and the rest we just won't bother to. We'll have one guy. We'll take Timothy Geithner, sitting in a little office with a light bulb somewhere down Battery Park, maybe in a shack, and whoever has a problem with his derivatives and other speculative instruments can come to him. And that's it. He'll handle it. And otherwise, this other guy, this bald-headed guy that went to build a wooden shack somewhere in the woods after doing the dirty work for Hank Paulson. I forgot his Sadari or something like that, I'm not sure.